Yeah, okay.
More or less.
Welcome to our meeting of Kiwanis Club of Downtown Madison Day on November 7th.
Yep.
All right, thank you. I lost it there. And so we'll start with the pledge of allegiance to the flag in the back. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our program today is going to be in regard to the Madison Public Library. So I understand you're making an introduction.
Our guest speaker today is Greg Mickells. He started as Library Director for Madison Public Library in 2012. He oversaw the completion of the $27 million renovation of Madison Central Library, which opened to the public in September 2013. The Central Library was recognized as its 2015 Landmark Library, and in 2016 received the ALA International Interior Design Award for Public Libraries. Other projects have included the relocation and expansion of the Meadow Ridge Library, which features a community kitchen, and most recently in 2020, the completion of the new Pinney Library on Madison's east side. His career spans almost 40 years in the library profession with positions in the travel with his wife, Bev, and he attempts to play golf. Mr. Michael.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to be able to address your group. It's really great to get back out there in person once again. I really enjoy meeting with members of the community and sharing the stories about our facilities and the types of programs and services we do. It continues to grow and expand in many different directions. And Jim was the one, Patch was the one who contacted me about speaking to your group. And he did remind me that I spoke to your group about 6 years ago. And we just touched base now on that. And I realized I was at the Madison Club, and I was trying to figure out, was that about Central Library, which I think it probably was a little bit, but we'd already had our doors open about almost 3 years since then. So I thought what I'd do is catch you up. So what's happened in the last 6 years? Well, since opening Central Library, we've opened 2 other new libraries that was mentioned in the introduction. We closed 9 libraries, and we're in the process of designing a new one. So where does that take us? Well, the 2 libraries we opened since Central was the first one, Meadow Ridge Library, that was mentioned in my introduction. That project relocated and expanded the library. If you're familiar with the Meadow Ridge Library, it's right on Raymond Road off of Whitney Way, and there's a shopping center there. And we were tucked away in the little corner. MSCR had a little facility in that shopping center. There was a rather large Ace hardware store, and the hardware store closed. And it was going to be a real challenge for the neighborhood. So at the time, Mayor Soglin called me into his office and said, do you have any ideas? What do you think the library could do to really continue to support this neighborhood, particularly with the hardware store going on? So I said, well, I think we could do a better job if you gave us a bigger space. And that's what he did. So actually what we ended up doing was moving from the small corner and relocating into the old hardware store. So the smell was a little bit to get used to at the first, but we took care of that. But what we also did was we had an opportunity then to really be very intentional about our partnership with MSCR. And they were taking over our old space, which left a vacant spot between us. And what we decided to do at that point was to combine forces and make that place between our two facilities a common area, a shared area. And with the several community conversations we had, there was really an emphasis on food that we could really tell at the time. In fact, I would go to community meals to meet with a lot of the neighborhood leaders, and we talked about that. And so what was decided at that point was to put a kitchen in the library. And that was really directed from an inspiration from the community that we saw that need. And how that is being used probably the most is we're a half a block away from Tokay Middle School. And particularly pre-pandemic, what we would see is kids would leave school about 3 o'clock. A lot of them would come directly to the library. And unfortunately, a lot of them would stay till 9 p.m. when we closed. And we realized at that point, particularly for these young students, the last meal they had was at lunch. And so we said, this is a need. How do we address it? So we started an after-school snack club. We had some private donors that provide all the funds for this. So when the kids come after school, we do a program where they'll get a snack. They might get some nutritional information. They might even help participate in the making of the snack. And it's gone over really well. It met a need in the community. That's kind of a theme that I present to this group of how libraries these days are beginning to, I keep going in and out, I'm sorry.
Been
Is
doing
that
it for
it?
years.
There? Oh, okay. There we go. Well, but what I wanted to emphasize is that's an approach that public libraries take these days, is really look to the neighbors, the communities we're serving, identifying needs, and then making our services and programs address that. Did you? Oh, wow. We'll have anywhere from 20 to 50 sometimes. So we'll get a big group there. A lot of it is coming back now from after COVID and schools reopening, but we do a lot of that.
Do they read?
Yeah, we do. We try to emphasize that along with that. But what's really important for kids, particularly middle school, is that they have a safe place after school. A lot of the kids are looking for different ways to socialize with each other, which is important. But we do sneak that in when we have them there about the value of reading. We make our resources available to them. And more importantly, we establish relationship where they find the library a welcoming place to come and be able to tap into our resources. So it's kind of that comprehensive plan that we try to do. You know, and it works well. It works well to build that relationship with the young people. We do a lot of collaborative work with the community center, MSCR, as well at that particular site. So I did want to get onto the second library, which is the Penny Library, which is right off of Cottage Grove. In Richard's, where'd Richard go? Is in his backyard. Oh, there he is over there. The library, that particular library, where we really wanted to focus was toward families. We saw the growing need for families. There's a lot of older adults in those neighborhoods. so that was a focus of our building as well. Unfortunately, right when we opened Penny Library, we were open for all of about 4 days before we had to close. But I'll get back to that in a little bit. But one of the features that I wanted to point out in Penny Library was our play lab. And that's a particularly designed area in our youth area for 0 to age 5. And what the play lab actually does is it focuses on children and exploratory learning through play, or what they describe as true play. It's a program that we partnered with a group out of China, actually. It's a principle that we learned about in Anji County, China. And we took this principle and we began incorporating it with some of our youth services. And that was where the play lab evolved from. We also do a partnership with our parks. We do a lot of the Anji play in parks as programs during the summer, and we bring families in and children. And it's all about early literacy techniques that children discover through play. And a lot of times you'll look at it going on. I remember my first visit to the park for Anji play, and I go, okay, they're playing. I see that. But when you have a trained librarian that explains what's actually going on, you have problem solving going on, because we just give them a variety of implements to work with, boxes, ladders, different things. So you see problem solving, you see risk taking, you see critical thinking happening. And one of the unique things about this is caregivers and parents bring their children to this, but we don't want them to get involved. We pull them over to the sidelines, and what we do is explain to the parents what's going on, what their child is experiencing through this particular exercise of Anji play. And there's 7 principles to it. And it's really amazing of how it engages the children. It's really amazing how we can communicate those lessons to the parents and the caregivers that come with their children. And a side benefit we're beginning to discover is that it's a gathering of the community as well. And, you know, when I'm attending an Anji play session, it's not uncommon for me to overhear parents talking to each other. Well, I didn't know you live 3 doors down from me, and this is the first time we've ever met. So it's kind of a little bit like the old front porch as well, that we're bringing community together in that way. But when I talk about early literacy, one of the things that I do hope that all of you take away today is the importance of early literacy. And, you know, Richard was telling me about his granddaughter and, you know, the love of reading that is so important. But where the focus is really super important for early literacy is age 0 from birth to 3 years old. And the reason for that is that's when the brain is developing the most. And so we work with that population as much as we possibly can, and work with the parents and emphasize the principles of reading to your child, singing to your child, holding your child, and all of these factors that will contribute to their early literacy. And if you do that, so if you've got grandchildren, if you've got other children that you're aware of, then 0 to 3 is so critical of a time to really give them that head start in their learning. And we work with a lot of populations across the city. And one example that I wanted to share with you in that regard was our Hawthorne Library, which is on East Washington, right off of Milwaukee. And that library is right next to a public health clinic. And it's also where people go for WIC payments as well. And I recall a youth librarian talking to me about her frustration. And she said, we see all these caregivers and these parents going into this public clinic. And they have their children with them, and they do their business at the clinic, and then they leave and they take off. And she goes, it's so frustrating. They're 10 feet away from our door and we can't get them to stop. And it would be so important for that baby that they have with them if they could learn our lessons, if they could get educated in early literacy. And I said, well, you have to really gain an appreciation for who the people are that are doing that, and what barriers we may have that they may have that we're not aware of. This individual might not have the opportunity to stay at the library because they might have to catch a bus, or they might have to get to another job, or there's so many other considerations, particularly for populations that seek assistance. So we said, this is something that could be solvable. And so not long after that, this youth librarian came to my office and she said, I had this idea. What do you think? And since all these people are going to public health, it kind of triggered to her, how do we reach parents and these children where they really need to be reached, is in their home? How do we do that? Because we definitely know that they don't have the opportunity necessarily to stop by the library. They don't have the opportunity perhaps, or even know that the library is the place they should take their child to at that early of an age. So she came up with the idea of who does reach these people in their home, and it's the visiting nurses program right out of public health, the group that we were working with. So she proposed the idea of, what if we trained the visiting nurses in early literacy techniques, and when they're making their visits and they're visiting with the parent or caregiver about nutrition for their child and child development, they introduce early literacy techniques at the same time. And we would do all the training. We would train the visiting nurses on how to do this. We would provide them with all the resources. So they show up with a bag of materials, with books that the families get to keep. It's not something they have to return, they get to keep. And it's just, she came up with this idea and I go, that's brilliant. And we've been doing this now for, gosh, maybe 3 to 4 years. We've reached hundreds of families this way, particularly during that critical 0 to 3 age. And, the visiting nurses go, why didn't we think of this before? Because this is really a critical part of child development to introduce this early literacy. What they also notice is that the techniques sometimes help the caregivers as well while they're there. So it was a win-win situation. So if you ever hear of a program called Parents as First Teachers, that's the program I was just talking about. And it's, like I said, it's been going on for about 4 years. We've probably reached almost in the thousands of families now by doing this. But what's important, again, is we recognized a need. How could the library be part of the solution? We had the skills, we had the information to share, but you have to consider those barriers. And I continue to challenge our staff all the time to think outside of our buildings. That's the way we have to be, particularly now. And how do we achieve that? So just a brilliant idea by one of our staff members that saw the relationship right there next door to her. And now it's grown tremendously. What I'm also proud to share with you is that all of this is privately funded. A lot of these programs that I talk about, like the snacks after school, the Parents as First Teachers, we can't always have sufficient budget within the city budget to support this. So we have a fabulous foundation that goes out and seeks donations, and they fund a lot of our innovative programs in that way. So getting back to closing libraries, and when I heard a little visible when I said close 9 libraries. Well, I kind of gave it away when I said we closed Penny Library after 4 days of opening, but when the pandemic hit, it was something I never imagined I'd ever do in my career or have to do in my career. But on March 17, 2020, I closed down an entire library system when the pandemic really hit. And we ended up moving to Safer at Home. We had no idea what this was going to look like at the time. I mean, seriously, we were talking, well, what do you think? It'd be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month? We had no idea. And we had no idea what the impact was going to be on our ability to provide services. We had, the only thing that we knew, and this remains a priority to this day, is the welfare of our staff and the welfare of the people that use our facility. And, you know, so throughout the entire last 2.5 to 3 years, we've followed very closely with public health guidelines. So it was a very difficult decision on our part, working with the mayor, working with the library board, to have to finally say, I think we'll have to close all of our libraries, at least for now. Not unexpectedly, there was extreme pushback from staff. There was a lot of staff that said, that's okay, I'll stick it out. We don't know what this is, but I know how important we are to the community. Let's keep them moving. And I just said, you know, I greatly admire that, but we don't know what we're dealing with here. We want to make sure you're safe, everyone's safe, and the people that use our facilities were there. But there was always this little constant undertone of what can we be doing? Because everybody now from the library was working at home. And these librarians started making phone calls. They would reach out to some older adults, some regular patrons, because a lot of older adults will use our facilities as their social contact. And we developed those relationships. And so librarians started making calls at home going, how's it going? Are you doing okay? Is there, you know, just so that they can keep those daily chats that they had with them. And then we started looking at how do we pivot our services if we can't be in touch. And that's when we developed online library cards. That's when we developed curbside service that you could reserve materials. And again, thanks to our foundation, there was a huge expansion of our online resources at that time as well, that they gave us money to do that. So I'm extremely proud of the resilience of our staff. Not my fault, okay. I'm extremely proud of the resilience of our staff during that time, because they really had to pivot from the regular way that we operated our libraries to be really innovative in how we can still provide services to the community. But one thing that we really struggled with, and one thing that's extremely important to so many people in Madison, is access to broadband, access to the internet. And a lot of us, I think, at times will take that for granted, that you know, you're always connected, you have your cell phones, you have your tablets, everything. So many people in our community do not have that connection. And that was a real concern for a lot of our staff, because we knew how important it was. So despite some of the unknown risks at that time, we only kept our facilities closed for about 3 months. Even though we were right in the throes of the pandemic and everything, the staff were willing to take that chance. And so we slowly began to reopen our facilities just for computer use. We would still have the collections closed off. We would retrieve items if people wanted it, but we had no idea back then how it was being transmitted. And now we know it wasn't going to come from touching books. It was a respiratory transmission, but we didn't know that at the time. But to give you a clue of how important that was, Meadow Ridge Library literally put up a letter-sized little flyer on their door that says, "We will be opening soon for computer access." And like minutes after that went up, there was people knocking on the door saying when. But if you think about it, going 3 months without that access for a lot of people, particularly for individuals that need that connectivity to help them connect them with resources, that's super important. And that's how we began before a lot of city offices outside of public health. We were one of the first to kind of reopen city services to the public because of that need. And then eventually we began to restore all of our services later on that year. But that kind of gives you an impression of how dedicated library workers are to the communities we serve. Gives you an impression of how innovative your library system is in addressing so many groups. We work with so many different populations now in so many different ways. We have a group of teen librarians that work with the Youth Detention Center on a regular basis on a program called Making Justice. Again, all privately funded, that we're able to do that kind of work, but so important to be able to make a difference to that particular group of young people that really need some focus, that need some assistance, and we make it fun. We work with Madison School District a lot of times. They're in particular on a program where they're trying to bring students back that had either dropped out or just lost connections or were suspended and never came back. They're very intentional about trying to bring these students back. We're part of that. We're part of that programming. Once a week, they come to the library and we work with those students and engage them. And in fact, all of our librarians now are known as community engagement librarians. And the reason for that is what I described earlier, even going way back to the Meadow Ridge Library and putting in a community kitchen, is that we feel it's important. Libraries for years have done outreach, and we continue to do outreach. We'll go to schools, we'll do book talks, we'll have programs and story times and everything. But one of the concepts I wanted to bring when I became director was the idea of community engagement. And what the distinction is there is that then it becomes a dialogue where we're looking for back and forth conversation. And what we need to do more of when we develop our systems and programs is to listen to our community. And they're the ones that really tell us what they need. And then we look at that and begin to tailor our services and programs. Yes.
Modern book burden, you say the citizens will tell you what they need. Sometimes it's what you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about citizens groups that have their nose out of joint for one reason or another?
Well, in regard to what, did you have a?
Collections, I guess.
Oh, collections. Oh, where there's there's always,
on your shelves.
yeah, we've, throughout my 40 plus years of service in this profession, there's always been challenges of some sort with that. And essentially where I feel we do an excellent job is have and communicate a set of principles of how those materials arrived there in the first place. And we have a very descriptive policy and methodology that we utilize to make sure that we have resources that represent everyone in our community. And sometimes, perhaps people don't identify with the particular resource we have, but I'm sure we have another one that they could identify. What we try to emphasize in our communication is that you have to be holistic that way, and you have to look at it collectively and be able to draw a line in the sand and say, yes, we will keep those materials. We always look at reconsiderations, and that's a valid question, and we don't dodge that. But we also defend the need that we have as a public library. Anecdotally, you could say if you have a good collection in a public library, it's going to offend someone. And that's what we follow by. So that's a great question. Unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues these days, I've been very fortunate in Madison, but a lot of my colleagues across the country are really facing some major challenges today with these blanket statements of, here's a list of books to remove from your collections. Have they read them? No. Do they know what they are? No. It's just, it's challenging for me, for my profession, and for how hard we work to create a collection that reflects our community, everyone in our community. And it's been a real challenge lately. We've been fortunate in Madison so far, but that's the principles we'll stand by and continue to do so. So thank you for that question. And kind of real quick, going off in the future, the third part was we opened 2, we closed 9, and we have a new one on the boards. We're actually in the process of designing a new library, another one on the east side. And that's in the northeast part of the city, which we've identified through a variety of studies using an urban planner that we consider a library desert. So we're in the process of designing that now. We're working again with the communities to how will this be purposed. I'm kind of excited. It's a project that you don't see much in the city, and that we're co-locating city services. Typically, we tend to build in silos. And this particular project, we're going to partner with Parks. It's going to be a library connected to a park pavilion. And we're also working with City IT to bring in a connection for civic engagement, particularly remote civic engagement. So people in neighborhoods will have an opportunity to participate in government without having to travel downtown. And that's something we're working on at all of our libraries. But that's on the boards right now. We hope to eventually get other city services. I'm talking to building inspection, Matt, the director there. I said, why don't you guys come in our facility? Maybe people could stop by and pick up a building permit while they're at the library instead of having to travel downtown. But that's the way we're looking at it. And why not? Why not make a lot of city services more accessible in your communities themselves? And that's what we're hoping to achieve with that. Right now, we're calling the entire project the Imagination Center. And that's some of the reasons behind it. But a library and a park pavilion, we're super excited. As I mentioned earlier, we already partner with Parks on Anji Play. We'll continue to do those kinds of things. We're going to help Parks do a lot of programming for education about nature. We're excited. It's going to be a relatively small library, about the size of Goodman South or of Hawthorne. But with that backyard we'll have, we'll be able to have huge events. So we're really excited about the project. We hope to complete design by the end of this year, early 23, and move on toward construction on there. But anyway, I've probably bumped into your meeting time. I apologize.
I'm not sure how long our meeting's gonna be, but does anybody else have questions?
What is the location of that?
It's in Rindle Park, which is across from,
Rhino Park, okay.
which is across from Easttown Mall.
Yeah.
But out of curiosity, how did the library, with the medical facility next door, how did that change the use of the library?
Well, you know, I think what we haven't been able to really track that and develop any metrics. But what we're going to do is open that door for possibilities and show them the importance of being engaged with library resources and having books in their homes. Sometimes this is the first time for some of these families to even have books in their home like that, and age appropriate books that they could read to their children. So I think that's a start. It's a start. And making parents as first teachers is the route to go.
Yeah, we've been in our house for 56 years, and one of the best parts of it is that we can walk to the Sequoia Library.
Ah.
But I have a question. Maybe even before you came to Madison, they discontinued the biography section in the library. Why did they do that?
Couldn't answer that one.
Okay, but do most libraries, do other library systems still have?
You know, it's, I know they will. I know some libraries will still maintain a section like that where it's separated out. Those are collection management decisions that smarter people than me make.
Yes, you touched on the funding. Could you expand a little bit and break down how much is private funded and how much is city Madison funded? And the second question, are your facilities at all available to anybody outside of the city? And if they are, what's the inner reaction?
Sure. Okay, the first question, budget. Our current budget is right around 21 million, which is our operating budget. That is through the city. Our supplemental funding really varies. It depends on the foundation and the types of donors we had. We had a recent donor, for instance, that gave us $1 million that we've been working with, you know, on that. When I started here, typically the foundation gave the library right around $25,000 to $30,000, and now it's regularly over 100,000 each year. So I mean, I need to emphasize it's not a replacement for our operating budget. We really couldn't do the work that we do by trying to privatize it in any second. And as far as the use of our meeting rooms, they're always available to the public for no charge. When it is no charge, that has to be a meeting that's open to the community that's there. Central Library, we have a lot more community space. So we do rent out our third floor on Central Library. In fact, pre-pandemic, we would have anywhere from 20 to 23 weddings a year that used our facility at the library, including a couple that met at the library on opening day, came back and got married in the building they met in. But we do rent out to corporate and private events as well. We have a caterers on board for that. So, but yeah, our meeting rooms are open to the public.
Talk about what, snacks in the afternoon? I got a couple of questions about that. First of all, do you find, or do they find that kids in the afternoon tend to intimidate older people from coming to the library?
You know, that's That's a great question, because as I mentioned before, everyone's welcome in our buildings, and we try to make it welcoming for everyone all the time. And sometimes I'll admit that's a challenge between young people and older adults. One of the things we worked out at Meadow Ridge in particular is we have a quiet reading room. And what we do is we looked at which users came to the library, and typically older adults come during the day and maybe in the afternoon, and then after school, more of the young people come. So we reserve that space for that particular purpose. So like during the day, older adults have exclusive use of our quiet reading room. And then since it gets a little noisy with a lot of young people around, they get to use the space. And so we contain a lot of the noise in that quiet reading room. It's not a quiet reading room, it's a loud room at that point. But that's how we try to contain a lot of that. And then throughout all of our libraries, we have a very detailed and posted behavior policy, and we adhere to it very strictly and fairly. And you know, we understand that perhaps a young person might not be having a good day, and we might ask them to leave for the day if we feel it's necessary. There's expectations for behavior by everyone that uses our facility.
And then the other question I had, which you answered, it sounds like you're doing something about it. I was thinking as you were first talking about the snacks in the afternoon, what about having somebody from, well, Orchard Ridge School or whatever come over and actually offer to help the kids with their homework?
No, that's no. We look at those opportunities to do homework help centers as well, and that's something we work with the MSCR, and a lot of our librarians focus on that. We have a lot of programs that try to help with that homework help situation.
Take advantage of it.
Some, yeah. Well, it's hard to say. You know, one thing I hope you appreciate sometimes is these kids were in class all day long. And now you're saying, wait a minute, get back in there. So we try to make it as accommodating for them, so it becomes enjoyable. So learning becomes enjoyable, reading becomes enjoyable. You know, because nothing's more important than a child learning to read, because you know, you have to learn to read in order to read to learn, is the way we look at it.
Does your foundation write grants? Because we have a community service grant program that sounds like this connection with the after school for kids might be a really nice fit.
Yes, they do. They reach out to a number of agencies throughout Madison and even nationally. They'll look for funding for a lot of our programs. And then we always feed them ideas about, you know, if they're visiting with a donor, we give them some shovel-ready ideas. So if the donor goes, well, I'd like to give you some money, but I don't know what for, we give them lots of ideas.
Dick runs that program.
Okay, that'd be terrific. Thank you. I'd appreciate, I want to stay for your meeting, but I've got to get to my next one myself. So thank you so much for inviting me and having this opportunity to share about our work. I hope if you have an opportunity to thank your librarian, they do a hell of a job. They really do. It's a tough job, and they do it so well here in Madison.
One more thing, sorry. One more thing, and maybe people already use it. I discovered this internet, checking out books on the internet during COVID, and I really took advantage of it. So
Still available.
it's all available on the internet. Yeah, it's free.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Terrific program about something that we probably touches all of us. So now I don't have the information on who, if anyone, might have a moment of reflection.
So this afternoon, I'm going to tell you a brief story about a maritime mystery. And some of you may know about this. It's been talked about before, but I find it very interesting. So, almost exactly this date in November 5th, in 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste, loaded with 1,701 barrels of alcohol, left New York City Pier 50 with Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members aboard. It moved into New York Harbor. The weather was uncertain, so it was 2 days later that the Mary Celeste finally left the harbor and entered the Atlantic, headed for Genoa, Italy. The keel of the future Mary Celeste was laid in late 1860 in Nova Scotia. She was constructed of locally felled timber with 2 masts and was rigged as a brigantine. That I had to look up, by the way, what a brigantine was. But anyway, she was launched on May 18th, 1861, and given the name Amazon. The Amazon had a checkered career, starting with its captain died just prior to the first voyage, then tangling with fishing gear off Eastport, Maine, colliding with another brig in the English Channel, which sank. In 1867, she was driven ashore in a storm and abandoned as a wreck. After being restored, she was purchased in 1868 and named the Mary Celeste. She had several more owners and more reconstruction before being purchased by consortium, with Captain Briggs being made captain. On November 15th, 1872, the brig De Gratia sailed from New Jersey for Gibraltar. It reached a position between the Azores and the coast of Portugal at 1 o'clock on December 4th, 1872, when its captain, Morehouse, came on deck after the helmsman reported a vessel 6 miles distance heading unsteadily towards the De Gratia. The ship's erratic movements and odd set of her sails led Morehouse to suspect something was wrong. As the vessel drew close, he could see nobody on deck, and when he received no reply to his signals, he sent his first and second mate in the ship's boat to investigate. The pair established that this was the Mary Celeste by the name on her stern. Then they climbed aboard and found the ship deserted. The sails were partially set and in poor condition, with some missing altogether, and much of the rig damaged with ropes hanging loosely over the sides. The main hatch was secured, but the 4 hatches were opened, their covers laying on the deck beside them. The ship's single lifeboat was missing. The binnacle housing the ship's compass had shifted from its place, and its glass cover was broken. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold, a significant but not alarming amount for a ship of this size. A makeshift sounding rod, a device for measuring the amount of water in the hold, was found abandoned on the deck. The ship's daily log was found in the mate's cabin, and its final entry was dated 8 a.m. on November 25th, 9 days earlier. It recorded Mary Celeste's position off of Santa Maria Island in the Azores, nearly 400 nautical miles from the point where the De Gratia encountered her. The De Gratia's first mate saw that the cabin interiors were wet and untidy from water that had entered through the doorways and skylights, but otherwise in reasonable order. He found personal items scattered about Captain Briggs' cabin, including a sheathed sword under the bed. Most of the ship's papers were missing, along with the captain's navigational instruments. Galley equipment were neatly stowed away, and there was no food prepared or under preparation, but there were ample provisions. There was no obvious signs of fire or violence. The evidence indicated that an orderly departure from the ship by the means of the missing lifeboat. Captain Morehouse decided to take the derelict to Gibraltar, 600 miles away. Under maritime law, the salvor could expect a substantial share of the combined value of the rescued vessel. Salvage court hearings began in Gibraltar on December 17, 1872, and the brig was examined again, but little evidence was found about the disappearance of Captain Briggs, his family, and crew. and they were never seen again.
Well, that's something to reflect on. Goodness, what's going on there? Um, Couple things that I have to cover. One is we received a thank you card from the Circle K, thanking us for the gold level sponsorship of the Circle K Marathon in the Wisconsin Upper Michigan for donations they had solicited, and they were able to raise over $4,000 for Camp Wabeek. So it's a little thank you card. The after hours will be meeting, should anyone be interested, tonight at 6 p.m. at Noodles and Company, the one on University Avenue. So if you want to attend there and interested in participating in any of their events, they always have a lot of interesting things that they'll be listing among themselves to do, and we'll decide on it. I have a question. There's been some discussion of wanting to have a greeter. A lot of things fell apart when we left down to the Madison Club, and that's one. So how many people here would be interested in having a greeter, just so we have a little friendly greeting as we come in? No one. Okay. That's it. Yeah, it's a small group. The other thing I wanted to ask about was that we do have things, club memorabilia and things and plaques and so on that are under the table and we could display here. And we could use a house committee again, which we sort of went away with COVID too. So is there anyone in this group that would care to help out with a house committee? And what we would need, like 3 or 4 people who would be a member of the committee, and then somebody could always be there.
I come early anyway.
Yeah, okay. So it'll be taken care of by the people who get here early and can take care of it. Tom, you had an announcement?
I just want to thank Kevin and Cole for helping out me. I couldn't make it because I COVID or I was cold and nowhere. I just don't like that. I want to thank you for coming out, playing a wonderful. Played 3 games of bingo, one more than we normally play. So they must call really quick. That must be really slow or something. But I want to give them big thanks for helping out.
Any other announcements for today? Jerry?
Number one, it's a Thursday, we have a blood drive at the Department of Revenue. It's the only place we have nowadays. And it's been about 3 months since we've had one there, and I'm halfway thinking it's going to be canceled because it's across the street from the big blood drive that they do at the Coliseum. So we'll see what happens, but it's been on the website for several weeks, and I don't think anybody's signed up yet. But you can sign up on the website, or you can let me know sometime, or if I don't hear from anybody for several weeks, I'll probably just send out an email to the group in general and ask for volunteers.
So are they having the big blood drive the same day?
No, the
Just-
23rd is the big one.
Yeah, it's a big one, but you can only get blood every
Right.
2 months. And so generally, they don't like to interfere with that one,
Okay,
especially because it's right across the street.
right. Okay. I thought I had signed up. I'll sign up and then you see how many you get.
I haven't checked for 2 days now, so.
Any other announcements? Well, next week we have Gigi's Playhouse. What is Gigi's Playhouse? You don't know? Okay. It's going to be enlightening. Jerry, you know? Oh,
It's a learning center on Winona Drive for young people with Down syndrome.
oh, great.
And I met the speaker at Miracle League.
Ah, excellent.
Oh, that's not the one I think.
The week after that, on the 21st, Terry Shockley will be speaking on the UW Wrestling NCAA Championships over the years. That will be interesting. So he's going to be on Zoom? Is he going to be in Florida already? Okay. It'll be cold here. Anything else? Anybody else have any other announcements? Any questions? Then I will adjourn the meeting for today. Thank you.
Come on, bring it, Dick.
That's enough.
Edward and